and publisher of Blank Slate Media. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our sit down with Nassau County Legislator Josh Lafazan, who is running for re-election on the Democratic line in District 18 against Samantha Getz, who is running on the Republican and Conservative line. The newly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the newly drawn District 18 is different from the old District 18. It is now comprised of Williston Park, Albertson, Searingtown, East Hills, Greenvale, Old Brookville, Glenhead, Upper Brookville, Matinacock, Center Island, Bayville, Millneck, Oyster Bay, and Laurel Hollow. So you go from the middle all the way to the Suffolk line. So who in the redistricting did you anger to get such a district?
So it's funny, and first of all, Steve, thank you so much for having me. The Republicans drew a map that's an egregious gerrymander, right? They drew a map that shoved me and Arnie Drucker, two Democrats, into the same district. They drew a map that drew Kevon Abrahams, the minority leader, out of his district. Yet, ironically, not one Republican was drawn out of their district. This was an attempt to put two Democrats into the same district to chip away at the Democratic caucus. I support the lawsuit that the Democrats have supported, and I believe these maps will be overturned next year.
Okay, don't the maps in terms of party registration favor the Democrats?
So if you look at, district registration it's interesting because I now I'm a redistricting expert, having gone through this process and learned from the lawyers. It's less about registration and more about performance, right? Because if you look at a district where you could say it's a fair fight district, but if you look at the maps that they drew, first of all, they admitted they didn't take race into effect, which we believe is illegal under the Voting Rights Act. And secondly, even though registration might be equal, performance is different. And in off-year elections where many districts favor Republicans who come out and vote more, the districts are not as fair as they are on the surface. But we think it's an egregious gerrymander. We think it will be overturned.
Do you have the numbers where you can say that this is a district that voted for Trump or Biden?
Sure. So we've asked for a breakdown of different kind of different metrics. We haven't gotten it yet. I will tell you that my district went from it was plus 5,000 Republican to now it's near even. But I will tell you, they drew me out of Syosset and Woodbury, where I served on the Syosset school board. I got elected when I was 18. I've lived in Syosset my entire life. To cut me out of my hometown was absolutely outrageous, and it was unnecessary, and it was done for political spite.
Okay. So you're not only running for county legislature, you've also announced that you're running for CD, Congressional District 3, currently occupied by George Santos. Yes. We had news yesterday, just breaking, that his campaign treasurer was indicted. And in the indictment, it's, she basically is accused of reporting things that George Santos supposedly did, that he put up his own money for $500,000. The indictment says he did. So there's a couple of scenarios that are in play. One is that there'll be a plea deal. I'm sure that prosecutors were, if he didn't know by now, we're letting George Santos know they weren't kidding around. So they indicted the campaign treasurer with the idea that she might decide to take a deal, and that deal may be pointing the finger at George Santos. So in which case, there might be a plea deal with George Santos. He might give up the seat. There's 70 days, there's an election. But that would be picked by the party leaders. There would not be a primary, so that would be more the party leaders on both Republican and Democrat. And then there will be election within 70 days, and then there'll be another race, but for a newly redrawn District 3.
Probably, yes.
So I guess you're running for the 2024 District 3?
Yes, and again, those maps are being litigated, and we're going to have a court case in the middle of November to see if those maps are going to change. And as an aside, the entire redistricting process needs to be overhauled. It's ridiculous. Whichever power happens to be in party every 10 years gets to draw the lines. It's an egregious process that both parties are guilty of. But yes, so I started raising money in January to replace George Santos in the 2024 primary. I will tell you that we pretty much paused all of our operations in April and May when it became apparent that George Santos was not going anywhere. Everyone with the brain said, when the New York Times story came out and when the indictment came out, all right, he's going to go. I've lost faith in the expedited process here.
Why would George Santos? I mean, this is kind of a realistic question.
Yeah.
I sort of think, in a way, that George Santos is getting a bad deal because I think he's got 13 charges against him now. Mm-hmm. It looks like it may grow based on the treasurer's indictment, but the leading contender for the Republican nomination for president has 91.
Yeah, well, so
and nobody is saying that he should step aside.
I will. Yeah.
Let's put it this way: no Republican is saying that.
Yeah. So to your point, I don't believe that George Santos will take a deal. I don't think he will leave. I think that he is defiant, and I think, well, delusional and defiant, I will say, but I think that he is going to stick out his entire term. And with that reality, we've pretty much paused all operations and said, I'm all in on running for re-election. We were hoping that the courts would hear this case to overturn the maps before this November, because, again, I believe it's an egregious gerrymander. But when that became the case that it wouldn't happen, these were the lines, and we're all in to win.
Now, how does that work? You're running for county legislature. You've already announced that if things go right, you're not going to finish out your term, that you're going to take a seat in Congress. Is that something that you think that voters would be okay with, is electing somebody who, months down the line could be leaving office?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's been excitement across the district as I knock doors for the legislature. Folks do want to talk about next year because George Santos is the biggest fraud in the history of American politics, in my opinion. And so it's certainly not without precedent. Bridget Fleming in Suffolk County and Kara Hahn, both sitting legislators, both got reelected while announcing they were running for Congress. So for me to be able to serve a wider constituency, and my entire legislative district falls within the congressional district, there's a lot of excitement because people want Santos gone, and they want somebody who can beat him, and I believe I'm the guy.
Now, you've received a lot of, my mailbox is full.
Yes.
Of mailers, and accusing you of all sorts of things. They've being with the Communist Party in a George Floyd, that you held a press conference with the Communist Party. Nassau County parents are, what are they? They're racist, I think one of them is, and the constituents are privileged. They're raising children. So I know that you've responded in your own mailers, but in terms of these things, they also mentioned, and I guess they've conflated, it was also the question of, they termed it a little bit different, that you're taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from a billionaire fraudster, who is, I guess, Sam Bankman-Fried. So why don't we take it one by one, since I know they're throwing a lot of mud, and sometimes the reaction is maybe I shouldn't respond to the individual, but to clear the record, Sam Bankman-Fried, did you take money from him?
Yeah, of course not. And let me just pause to say this. We're exploring a lawsuit against numerous parties, specifically the Republican Party here in New York State, and the North Shore Leader, which is a local paper, for intentionally defaming and misleading voters. And I will tell you, it's beyond frustrating. But when you look at, and I'm happy to go one by one, I've never spoken to Sam Bankman-Fried. I've never met him. And anyone, honestly, can say that this is a lie because when somebody donates money to a super PAC, they legally cannot coordinate with the candidate. And so I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. His PAC spent money supporting my campaign as they did Democrats across the country who were.
Now, was that based on you not support, that you were wanting, I read somewhere, wanting to deregulate cryptocurrency?
Absolutely not. The stated goal of the PAC was about pandemic prevention. And as a member of the health committee, I've been outspoken since my election to the legislature on public health preparedness, on bringing first responders and bringing community leaders together to make sure we're prepared for a public health emergency. And they supported folks across the aisle, across the country. But I've never spoken to him. I've never met him. And it's a downright lie that I took money from this person and somehow I'm not giving it back. It's an egregious lie. And the worst case is they know better. And that's what we hope to prove in a lawsuit, that it's an intentional lie.
Okay. Is that something, you know, in politics, they usually give very wide berth to saying stuff about people running for elective office.
Yeah, so you know, obviously the burden of proof is higher for somebody in public office, but we can't run campaigns like this, right? And we have to be better than this. And I will tell you, as I've knocked thousands of doors in this district, the disgusting nature of these mailers, they're turning folks off. And I love when I knock on a Republican door and they're just as angry, because this is not how we can run campaigns, with just mudslinging of stuff that is not remotely accurate. And you can tell, because you're in my district, the mail that we send and the mail the Republicans send couldn't be more of a dichotomy. The mail we send is about my record and the issues I stand on. The mail they send is outrageous lies. The idea that I would align with the Communist Party is laughable if they didn't send it as a true mailer. It's beyond.
Now, you were at a Black Lives Matter rally after with George Floyd, and what does the Long Island Communist Party have to do with that?
I didn't even know there was a Communist Party. It's almost a joke because he's a communist has become parody. So and this is where the Republicans have lost credibility, specifically my opponent in this district, because for someone to get a mailer, not satire, that Josh Lafazan is aligned with the Communist Party, it's such a desperate attack because it's laughable. It's sophomoric. It's stupid, is what it is. And quite frankly, the volume of mail has just worn out the voters in this district. We can't campaign like this. When you run for office, run on your record. Period.
We this week's editorial in 6 Blank Slate Media publications said that candidates should do what you're doing and sit down and do that. It's fine if you want to send out all the mailers, but you ought to be subject to being questioned
100%
on that. Now, what about this, about what you said about parents and white privilege?
Yeah, it's outrageous. And they are just making blatant stuff up. And that's where we're exploring a lawsuit, because you don't get to just make stuff up to defame somebody's character. That's not how campaigns can be run. And quite frankly, it's unconstitutional to just put words in somebody's mouth. I've never, ever done that, and I never will. And what is remarkably frustrating is that there is no level to how shameful these mailers can be. And quite frankly, whether my opponent is the brainchild behind them, she is culpable, because when you run for office, you put your stamp on everything your campaign sends out. And I've challenged her to debates. We're still waiting for a response. And I challenge her to come on your show or to come on any show and defend some of this garbage. She won't.
There was a case that you did not report a $100,000 loan from what was termed a billionaire couple for schooling. What was that? What was the outcome of that?
Again, another shameful lie that's gone nowhere. I have a student loan like kids across the country. Not a single dime has touched my personal account. Every dollar through their lawyers goes directly to my school, and I will pay that back loan like everyone in this country. And for them to...
What was there an actual couple that put the money in the account?
No, so not a dime has ever touched my account. I mean,
was it a couple did pay for your education?
I have a private loan. As students across the country, when you go to college, you can have a loan from an institution, you can have a private loan. That loan was executed by lawyers. That loan is completely above board. That loan is completely legal, and it was absolutely disclosed on my financial disclosure. And what they are trying to do to not only defame me, but to defame these individuals who are philanthropic in our community and good stewards of our community, again, is disgusting. But there is no depth to how low they will stoop. No.
But did you have to make any changes to your disclosure with the county? I think you need to report debt to the county.
We followed legal advice that we were given. We reported it on our financial disclosure federally, which requires far more disclosure than county. We reported it on county. We have followed legal advice to the letter of the law, and we will continue to do so.
Okay. So getting down to issues, what do you consider right now in your role for county legislature?
Yep.
The most important issues facing the county and that you think are the most important issues?
So affordability is top of mind, right? Whether you're a middle-class family trying to afford to stay here, you're a senior hoping to retire in place, you're a young family looking to move here, it is too expensive to live here. And so we have to look at how can we ease the property tax burden that folks are feeling? How can we bring down costs? How can we make sure that we are saving money by cutting costs at the county level and cutting ways to not only not raise somebody's taxes, but to lower their taxes? And so I've been outspoken that we have this big surplus in large part because of federal dollars we received from the administration of Joe Biden. And I believe that rather than spending that money, we should put the money back into the pockets of the taxpayers. And we have a...
How much is that, those federal tax dollars?
Sure. Well, so, we're going to have hearings. The comptroller is going to come before the legislature, and this month is budget season. And so I'm looking forward to getting specific metrics in terms of what is the stated surplus? What is your plan for property tax relief? And if we have this surplus, why shouldn't it go back into the dollars of the taxpayers? Laura Curran did the same thing.
Let's on the question of affordability.
Yes.
Governor Hochul says there's a shortage of 800,000 housing units in New York. We have that shortage has helped fuel home prices going up very high. So young families, young couples, young people cannot afford to live here. Apartments in the city, average rent $4,000. So she proposed accessory dwelling units, an idea that's being adopted in other states. Mm-hmm. And she also then talked about, okay, when that went by the boards, mm-hmm. She then suggested, okay, let's say that in Nassau County, which has the lowest number of housing units built Correct. In the metropolitan area, and some of the other suburban areas, that there be a 3% increase over 3 years, suggesting doing it near the Long Island Railroad train stations, transit-oriented development. That was also top down. What do you think should be done? First, the amount of the population of Nassau has stayed essentially the same from 1960 to 2020 census. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you think that there should be more housing in Nassau? Because that doesn't seem to be what the consensus is. And if so, then how is it done?
Sure. So as an overall, I disagreed with the governor's proposal to override local zoning and to put a blanket number. I disagree with it, and quite frankly, my constituents disagree with it as well. However, since I'm elected to the legislature in 2017, I've been outspoken that we have a housing issue in Nassau County. And when folks talk about it's so expensive to buy a house here, a lot of it is simple supply and demand. Right, Nassau County, as you said, has the lowest number of new housing units built in the country. Nassau, Florida had the highest. And there was an interesting dichotomy between Nassau, Florida and Nassau County in Bloomberg. But I will tell you, Tom Suozzi championed the idea of cool downtowns back in 2000. We have to get back to that idea that downtowns where you can build, where you have a train station, where you can build within the community's consensus of what is reasonable, but you can have, apartments for young people to move in. We also have to do a far better job of having towns and villages overhaul building departments. Speak to anybody who's tried to put a shed on their, or a new bathroom in their house. Dealing with building departments is a nightmare. We have to streamline that process to allow folks to renovate their own properties. Again, we have to make it easier to build. We also have to incentivize developers because it's very expensive here on Long Island to build. And so working with IDAs, working with the governor's economic council, we can make housing a reality here. However, her plan to have a blanket number and her plan to override local zoning, I don't support.
Well, the place on the other side, there seems to be an incentive not to build since people are happy with it. They don't want it. They don't want to be in Queens. They don't want to be in other Brooklyn. And their home, with a shortage of housing, the value of their homes go up.
Very high. Yes.
People who are living in a home, they're going to do it. And local officials have had 60 years to figure this one out.
Yeah, well,
and they haven't. So what makes you what is it that's going to make a difference where these local areas that you have the most restrictive zoning, you're in one of the most segregated counties.
Yeah.
What is going to change? What is going to occur that would change that?
Yeah, I think what occurs is having a newer generation of elected officials in office. And quite frankly, it's why I support term limits, to have this turnover of some folks who I consider stale and not forward thinking. I'll give you a specific example. Before the casino project, if you look at the last iteration of the Nassau Hub proposal, I was able to work with Laura Curran, where we had a commitment for 500 housing units at the Nassau Coliseum site. That was going to be an incredible boon to that development, to have bus rapid transit to Carl Place and Mineola for young professionals to live here and reverse commute to the city, and to commute to work to the city and come back to live here. And that project was moving forward. And I think the casino is a better project, but having those types of projects that make sense for those specific communities and having elected officials who understand the urgency here, I think is what changes. And it's why I'm supporting a number of candidates across the island who I think are forward thinking as well.
Let's go to assessment. You mentioned, this has been portrayed by Bruce Blakeman, County Executive Bruce Blakeman. What Laura Curran had a reassessment. We go back in history, 2010, Mangano elected. 8 years, no reassessment. People challenged. If you challenged, your taxes went down. If you didn't, your taxes went up. For the most part, younger people, less affluent people were the people who usually were overpaying. Then Laura Curran put a 2-year break. It was so out, the changes were so great that she said it had to be phased in. Then she stopped phasing it in completely the last 2 years. Bruce Blakeman takes over. He's now frozen the rules for 2 more years. So 2 out of since 2010. It's going to be like 15 years. You haven't done it, which anybody who's involved in assessment says the assessments are going to be wrong. You're going to throw everything out of whack. It's going to be inequitable. And yes, the taxes can go up a lot if you assess. On the other hand, that's only for some people. The people that have been underpaying, then there are the other people who are overpaying. They're going to see a big drop. So that Bruce Blakeman said the part of it's going to be a big tax increase. He was only talking to the people who were underpaying their taxes, and who apparently liked it because there was a lot of reaction. So and I just saw the Democrats were saying, Blakeman said that he's not going to raise property taxes. Democrats said you should pay down and you should reduce taxes. And I'm wondering, well, what about all those people that are overpaying? What's the plan here? You can cut my taxes, but it won't be as much as if you reassess me to what my house is really worth.
And I'll tell you, Bruce Blakeman came into office and said, I'm going to fix assessment. That was 2 years ago. Nothing's changed, and so it was a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of nothing. My belief is that the county has proved over the past couple of decades that we cannot accurately assess at scale. And like other municipalities, I think the only way forward to accurate reassessment is if we move assessment to the towns on a more local level, like other counties across the state. It's something that's bipartisan. Jack Martins, as a Republican, proposed it in 2017 when he ran for county executive. So that, to me, is the only pragmatic way forward here. It's something I support.
Okay, so you say give it to the towns to handle the assessment.
Yeah, I don't believe we can do it accurately. I think it's been such a calamity at the county level. I think there's been so much political influence. I think there's been so much mismanagement that it's resulted in something that's not working. And if other municipalities have been able to make it work at the town level because it's more localized, then I think Nassau County should at least explore it. And again, having something that has bipartisan roots. If it came from Jack Martins as the Republican county executive candidate, it's good enough for Bruce Blakeman as the Republican county executive.
Taxes, like where are, number one, one of the big problems with the taxes is the assessment system.
Yes.
Because of this county guarantee that they guaranteed you guys, because you have a dysfunctional assessment system,
right,
lose a lot of the appeals. And it's not just for the county, it's for the special districts and the school districts.
That's right.
The school districts love this because they're going to get paid no matter what, but that becomes the county burden. But so aside from fixing an assessment system that's costing that, what else should be done in terms of county taxes that represent what, 15, 17% of my tax bill?
Yeah, we have to repeal the county guarantee. And I've spoken to folks up in Albany. I think it's going to take significant aid because it's such a calamity and a mess right now that in order to transition, we're going to need help from Albany. And I've spoken to our reps up there. But this idea that the county has this unique burden that no other municipality has to make every other local municipality whole is unsustainable. Right. And continuing to borrow money to fill that gap and paying interest on that money, our debt service obligations are far too high and they're becoming higher. So I think we do need to repeal the county guarantee, but I think we also need to do it in tandem with our folks up in Albany to bring some aid to make sure we can get it done without pain to other municipalities.
Well, I think there's two obstacles. One is the fact, unless you have accurate assessment.
Correct.
Everybody else is going to end up losing a lot of money, which they don't want. And the last time around, when Ed Mangano tried to get rid of the county guarantee, the school district opposed this, and they won.
Yeah, and so I'll tell you to your 2 points. I agree. The first point is I would like to do it in tandem with moving assessment to the towns while it's to get the role accurate. And I think that's first and foremost. But secondly, I think if we can work with our representatives in Albany to get aid to those school districts to help us transition, it would save us money in the long run. And so I think we have to bring in our partners up in Albany to make that happen.
Just crime statistics. Crime was a major issue in countywide races. Bail reform was blamed on an increase.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me why, unlike New York City, every month, usually the third day after the month, you get the crime statistics for the city of New York in every category, and they have a chance to respond and say, if things went up, we're going to do this. If they went down, this is what we did. So far this year, I think it's been released once.
Yeah, and
if you go to, and this is supposed to be a big issue. Now, I, as a taxpayer and newspaper, we want to look at those stats. We've had to foil them in the past to get them on a more regular basis. And if you go to StatCam and look at it, it probably, I haven't checked this morning, but it may be 4 or 5 months. I think before they had the end of 2022, it was something like March or April. Why don't the county legislators demand to see monthly reports so that they know what Bruce Blakeman has said is the highest paid police department, how effective they are?
We have been asking for those reports, and I'll tell you, it's a pattern of, if information is not flattering to the county executive, then it's very hard to get that information to the public, right? This is not an isolated area of disagreement here, but no, we've called for more transparency in this area because folks deserve transparency when it comes to their own safety and their feeling of safety. So again, we have hearings coming up in the next couple of weeks, public safety hearings about budgeting. It's something we'll bring up again, that the public deserves to have this information, again, on parity with what other municipalities do. It's very simple. Transparency is a good thing.
Well, you had said that police reform was an important thing to you. What did you mean by what do you want to see reformed?
No, I was grateful to work with our partners in different law enforcement unions and work across the aisle. Having body cameras on Nassau County patrol officers was a huge victory for the public and for our officers. I believe it protects our officers when they are at the scene. I think it protects the public, and that was an enormous win for one of the premier public safety departments in the country. And that was a big win, and I will tell you, other unions have.
Nassau County was like last in the United States, and each
Sure.
policeman has to be paid $3,000 a year to wear a body camera.
Sure. So Laura Curran's administration negotiated the deal. County legislators don't negotiate deals. We approved them, and to me, getting a win here in having body cameras, I think, was an enormous win. The fact that we were able to do it with bipartisan support was really important, and I was proud to work on that.
What about, I mean, there's lack of transparency. The Vera Institute found that Nassau County tied for second lowest score for police transparency in the United States. It only trailed Birmingham, Alabama, not known for its transparency in policing. Why the lack of transparency? Let me go with a go thing. Well, why not? Right, in terms of releasing statistics, let's take it. Well, let's do this other case. Nassau County reported it. There is no civilian review board like New York City. Nassau County reported. Let me close my door. I got a dog barking here. Okay. Nassau County reported 0 founded cases of false arrest and excessive force from 2016 to 2021. During that time, 30 people won judgments from the police department. How can, clearly, how is that possible? In New York City, twice a year, the law department will release settlement cases, including, there's a semi-annual report. They include the name of both parties, the police shield number, the total payout. Nothing in Nassau County. New York City doesn't have qualified immunity, which gives special protections to police. Letitia James has cited Nassau County for its lack of that. And yet the only people who have complained in the legislature are Kavon Abrahams, Celia Benoit, Carrie Szilagyi, all people of color. Why is nobody else, why no one else calling for more transparency?
Sure. So I'll tell you, my views stand in contrast to the folks in my own party. I don't believe we should have a civilian review board here. I don't believe we should end qualified immunity. So I know I stand in contrast to some folks in my district, but I've been able to work on this concept of community policing in tandem with the police department. So I will tell you, expanding the POP unit, especially in the 2nd precinct, where we have officers who are in the communities, we're building trust within the communities, within underserved populations within the communities, has been a huge win, right? To have officers who are undergoing cultural competency training and understanding different holidays for different groups, to have the POP unit in our houses of worship to make sure people can pray without fear. We've been doing a lot in terms of community policing, and
let me ask you this: highest paid police force as per Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman. Shouldn't we know what the rate of incidence is? Shouldn't there be transparency for police excessive force, whether the police force as a group is actually abusing people or not? Right now, there is no way. We've left it to the people to police themselves internally, and we don't know how much money is paid out. All of the payments are done with non-disclosure, so we don't know how much is being paid out. We don't know the number of incidents. We don't know whether they're doing a good job or a bad job, and if they're doing a bad job, what should we do to correct it? How are the taxpayers supposed to be able to make a judgment of the police, and how do you get rid of the bad apples?
Sure. So I'll tell you in terms of settlements, I sit on the finance committee. And so before Nassau County executes a settlement, we speak to lawyers in executive session and we hear about cases. But I am very worried and wary about whether it's officer privacy or whether it's the push in Albany to hear about allegations that are unfounded. I do want to protect officer privacy. However, we've worked with Commissioner Ryder in terms of recruitment and increasing diversity of our ranks. I think that's a really important point, that we want a police force that represents the communities they serve. We've worked with Commissioner Ryder about the overall training and types of training that needs to go in. I specifically, in terms of food allergies, I talk about wanting our officers. I support carrying EpiPens to make sure they can respond to newer issues. So I will tell you, I've had a really good working relationship with the commissioner. I will tell you, we are searching for a better relationship with the administration, because many of the types of data reporting we ask for, we don't get. And again, if there is a report or if there is data that is unflattering to the county executive, specifically in terms of crime stats, it's very hard for the public to see them. He's very much about his image and less about fairness.
Do you know right now what the crime rate was in Nassau County in the month of September?
Sure. So we get reports at the end of every month. I have a stack of pages on my desk. I can get you the specific stat rate, and they break it down in terms of types of crime. But
why is that not released to the public?
It's a question we'll ask the administration, quite frankly. And we have these public hearings over the next couple of weeks. We will ask the administration why. I will tell you that quality of life crimes have not decreased at a rate fast enough. Somebody having a catalytic converter stolen out of their car matters. Somebody having their mailbox rummaged through matters. And we have not done a good enough job at making sure we're eradicating these types of quality of life crimes.
The Sands Hotel agreement, now there's a 99-year lease.
Yep.
In the hub. What's your feeling about the agreement?
Sure, I voted for the agreement. I think this is moving Nassau County forward. First of all, they're going to assume the debt on the Nassau Coliseum rebuild. And let me pause here. This entire process over the past 2 decades has been a calamity. And I think the fact that it's taken 2 decades plus to get something moving is why people lose faith in government. This was absurd, right? Holding a referendum under Ed Mangano in the middle of August for a new Coliseum, the Lighthouse project, which had so much community opposition that was based on politics, and then building a new Coliseum, which we're now talking about potentially raising because it doesn't fit the profile of this exact plot. The whole thing is absurd. In terms of this project, Sands is going to assume the debt, the $100 million that we owe on the Coliseum. They're going to create 8,000 jobs. It's going to bring massive revenue to the county. Of course, it hinges on getting a casino license, but I did support the lease transfer. I'm curious as to what the holdup is now with the town of Hempstead and why things have slowed, but I did support the lease transfer and I did vote for it.
Now, your colleague, Delia Duriga-Wooden, was the lone opponent, and she said she has concerns about traffic and addiction. What is your response to her?
Sure. I respect Delia tremendously. She's an exceptional legislator. We disagree here. I had a number of concerns, which I was able to air directly to Sands representatives and have my concerns ameliorated about traffic, about crime, and speaking specifically to substance abuse leaders about what Sands is going to do, whether it's gambling addiction or drug addiction or alcohol addiction, to bolster the resources that we have locally. My concerns were met. Again, the dream concept for this project for me was never a casino. For decades, I'm a huge Islanders fan, and the fact that we weren't able to keep the Islanders here is a travesty, in my opinion. But faced with the issues we have now of the massive debt on the Coliseum property, of lack of potential suitors here, I think it's a good thing to move the county forward. And I'm really excited about the jobs my constituents can go after now.
Okay. Judges, apparently they don't have to, they stand for election, but the election is already decided by Jay Jacobs and Joe Cairo in advance by them cross-endorsing. Even though it's supposed to be a free and fair election, but it's, what's your feeling on it? Steve Ballone in Suffolk County thinks this is a very awful and undemocratic idea. How did it happen in Nassau?
Sure. So again, the concept of fusion voting, where people can be on different ballots, and that's what Steve Ballone had spoken about. I do think we should get rid of fusion voting at the state level, right? You have one candidate for one line, simplifies it for the voters and gives voters choice. I do understand Chairman Jacobs here, and I do support what he's doing in terms of guaranteeing that we have the type of qualified bench, given that we can get our picks through. I know some of these judges personally who have been recommended by Jay Jacobs. They are exceptional jurists. And so I understand, given the landscape we have now, I do understand the process. However, in my perfect world, we would get rid of fusion voting and you could run on one line and that would be it.
You think they should come up with a similar system for county legislators?
Make my life a lot easier, wouldn't it? No, I'm a big believer in terms of getting politics out of the court system. It's unfortunate that politics plays a role in terms of who sits behind the bench. And my hope is there would be a better system as a nation where it could be far less political, and you're seeing the effects of it. You're seeing a rogue judge in a state put a hold on a national issue. Right, you're seeing it all over the country, and you specifically saw it in terms of the post Roe v. Wade world. So we have to get politics out of the court system. I also think we need more judges, by the way, and I support a bill at the state level to increase the hiring of more judges to expedite the backlog of cases. So there's a lot of reform that needs to happen.
You were endorsed last time around, along with Delia Wooden, by the Conservative Party. Mm-hmm. You weren't this time. What happened?
I didn't seek the endorsement. I will tell you, and we've spoken about this. I'm planning to run for Congress next year. At the federal level, my stance on supporting a woman's right to choose, and my belief that we need to get illegal guns off our streets and get the gun control, the gun epidemic in this country in terms of mass shootings. My stances on these two issues deferred from the Conservative Party at the national level. I have nothing but respect.
But you did accept it 2 years ago, so
sure. As a local official with no concept that I would ever run for higher office. Tom Suozzi decided to run for governor. It took the world by shock. He was a sitting congressman, incredibly popular, and somebody who, as in his words, could have stayed there for the rest of his life. And so at the local level, as a local official, and at the time being a registered independent, I felt that local issues and if you look at a number of parties at the local level, I try to be a nonpartisan local legislator. I try to focus on quality of life issues that are nonpartisan, making sure we're taking care of our veterans, making sure that we help people with disabilities and substance abuse, and fixing the freaking roads. So much of what I did focused on local issues.
It's just not national issues. The state Conservative Party opposes any efforts by the state to change with local zoning laws. They oppose any efforts to reverse the concealed carry law. They also are opposed to tax dollars being used in New York to prevent or end a pregnancy. That's contraception.
So you're mentioning the state party. I will tell you, when I met, and by the way, not just Delia Dirigi-Whitten, but Madeline Singas as the DA received a cross endorsement. And in Suffolk County, you have exceptional elected officials like Suffolk County Sheriff Errol Toulon who have cross endorsements. So at the local level, I met with the party and they believe their two biggest issues were taxes and substance abuse. And quite frankly, I stand united on those issues, that we need to lower taxes and that we need to do more when it came to substance abuse. And that's why I felt comfortable, and Delia felt comfortable, and Madeline Singas felt comfortable as I explore a run for federal office. My views on some federal issues are divergent with theirs, and so I didn't seek the endorsement.
So in environmental issues, you recently proposed legislation to make Nassau carbon, not the county itself, not all of Nassau.
Right, correct.
County government to be. Now, what does that entail?
Sure, and again, I place an important caveat that this is Nassau County's municipal operations. This is not an individual mandate for anybody. This is talking about the county as an enormous landlord of buildings, as with a fleet of vehicles, looking at how we can make our municipal operations carbon neutral, which, by the way, won't just protect the environment, but it's going to save us a fortune, right? It is incredibly expensive to be the landlord for buildings across Nassau. It's incredibly expensive for fuel and maintenance on our fleet of vehicles. And so my bill, which has stalled, unfortunately, would create a task force to look at how we could move the county forward by 2035. I'll tell you, I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club. I'm endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters. I'm proud of my record on environmental issues.
In terms of preparation for climate change.
Yeah.
I think there was a recent story this week, there was comment on the fact that where is Nassau County in preparation for what we all now know is going to happen. We're going to have more severe storms, rainfall. We just had it. The South Shore really got whacked. Where is Nassau County in terms of being prepared to deal with the reality of, what most people would say is attributed to climate change? We
are far behind, and it's scary. And so I hosted a press conference this week calling for an urgent hearing about our infrastructure needs. Steve, if you look at the rainstorm last week that turned our roadways into lakes in the matter of hours, we are far insufficient in terms of drainage on our roadways to deal with increasing and heavy rainstorms. We are far behind in terms of the resiliency of our electrical grid, that far too often we lose power during a routine storm. If you look at our emergency response protocols and how we get emergency information to all different parts of the county, if you look at our sewers and how you had sewage leaking in Baldwin and sinkholes continuing to pop up, there is significant work to be done here in terms of preparedness for extreme weather, where we have 100-year storms happening every single year. We're far behind.
This may be when, if you ever got to Congress, but why is the federal government, and I guess, is there anything that the town can do or the county can do, where we give people money to rebuild their homes in areas that are going to be susceptible for floods? Yeah. And then we're going to have to rebuild the homes again. And they do it again. And it can happen 2 or 3 times. Shouldn't there be a study that says, hey, you should not be building in these locations anymore?
Well, I'll tell you, something I called for at the press conference was we should have a hearing on, we passed $1 trillion infrastructure package at the federal level. The county hasn't seen a dime. Why are we not aggressively working with our federal partners to make sure we can go after that money to offset costs of major infrastructural renovations and improvements here in the county? So that's a question I have. But to your point of federal aid, there is precedent here, right? State and local, in terms of folks, whether they're replacing their aging cesspools with newer, safer septic tanks, or whether we can raise homes in flood zones to make sure that they're less susceptible. We have to be far more pragmatic and far more urgent in terms of our infrastructure and our residents in disaster-prone communities. And I represent a Long Island Sound district. So how can we look to increase drainage along those roadways so our first responders can get to a house in the wake of a storm? Or how can we make sure that our septic systems, we're connecting more communities to sewers, and those septic systems are safer so we don't have leakage of effluent? There's so much to do. and there's far lack of urgency, and it's why I called for the press conference.
Isn't there money? Did Wiggins said that there was infrastructure money and that the county is not spending it, doesn't have a spending plan.
Yeah, so we have $239 million in ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan funding, that has to be allocated at the end of the year. And one of the covenants is that we can use that money for whether it's water treatment or water protection. There's so much we can do in terms of protecting Long Island's waterways. And we have no plan from the county executive as to how they're going to spend that money. You mentioned transparency. We want to know where the money's going to be spent. We have until the end of the year, and it's already October.
Shouldn't there be like a 4-alarm fire sounding that we're going to lose use of 239 million?
Well,
that seems like a decent amount of down payment on some good projects.
There should be. My concern is the county executive knows how he's going to spend those dollars and is not disclosing it to the public. And so we deserve to know, especially before an election, right? We deserve to know what is the county's direction on spending this money that is a once in a generation opportunity to significantly impact and improve the lives of folks across the island. So we deserve to know.
Opioids, I think you had touched on it, and in terms of what's taking place in Nassau County. What to be done? That's another area that I think your colleague said that there is money that from the settlement that has not been allocated. What should be done to deal with what is the level of prices in Nassau County, and what is being done about it, and what should be done about it?
Yeah, it's significant. I talk about my record on this issue. I passed Timothy's Law, where in Nassau County, for the first time, we have a 24-hour substance abuse hotline, and we have the Nassau Cares app where people can plug in their zip code and find directions to the nearest treatment center. That was a huge win, and that was done in my first term. In the term since, we've lost momentum on this issue, and we need to regain it. And so first and foremost, we need to expedite the transfer of those dollars from the opioid settlement and from the ARPA funding directly to these nonprofits on the ground. Right? LICAD, Family and Children's Association, Seafield Center, Yes Community Counseling. Our nonprofits are incredible. They need to be funded, and they need to help recruit and retain staff who are getting burnt out, and they need to be able to reach people all across the county. There's a great bill about fentanyl test strips and making sure that we're getting harm reduction tools to folks to make sure we're saving lives. That bill has stalled. And so passing pragmatic legislation there, making Narcan more widely available and training as many folks as we can in the use of Narcan. There's so much to be done, but urgency is the issue. And again, with so many other issues, we don't see a sense of urgency.
The housing of migrants. You have in New York City, which has more than 100,000 migrants. These are people that, for the most part, are asylum seekers, which makes them here legally legal.
Yep.
You're allowed to, if you're facing imminent threat in your home country, can come here. They can't, thanks to our immigration laws, they can't work for 6 months. So the city of New York has more than 60,000 in the shelter. No one else is taking them. Nassau County, the borough president of Queens, suggested Nassau Coliseum be used to house some of these people and take the pressure off. What's your feeling on housing migrants in locations in Nassau County?
Sure. No, where the county executive is right, I give credit where credit's due. And I agree with County Executive Blakeman that I don't believe it's appropriate to house these migrants within our county. I will say, if you look at immigration on a federal level, our federal representatives have failed us significantly. They failed us for decades on a major issue. Immigration is a major issue to the United States economy. It's a major issue in terms of the flow of fentanyl over the border. And so we need our federal representatives to get significant aid to the city to be able to offset some of these costs. But no, I agree with the county executive. I don't believe it's appropriate to house the migrants here in the county.
Isn't there a moral demand that people in this, one of the most affluent places, take care of people who are, again, they're asylum seekers who are fleeing personal harm isn't there responsibility for taking on some of those people?
I understand your argument here, but there's a concern, especially when it comes to cost, that this cost will be absorbed by the taxpayers. There's a concern in terms of crime and police overtime, and so I understand your argument. I just happen to agree with the county executive here that this is not it's not appropriate for Nassau County to be housing migrants here.
Congestion pricing. The city of New York has and the MTA are planning on putting a toll if you drive below 59th Street to alleviate congestion and pollution and raise money for their mass transit. Some people have commented on it, some people haven't in terms of it. Do you have a view on the city's plan?
I do, and I represent a district with an enormous amount of folks who commute to the city via their own personal vehicles, and I'm against congestion pricing. And I'm proud to be endorsed by a number of environmental groups, and we can disagree on this issue. I think it hurts Long Island commuters. I think it hurts the outer boroughs who are going to absorb so much of this other traffic. And I think if the ultimate goal is to fund the MTA, we don't have to do it on the backs of Long Island commuters. And so my constituents don't want it, and I don't want it.
What do you say to the congestion just in Nassau County? Because the congestion doesn't begin at the Midtown Tunnel and the Hitchcock Bridge. Anyone driving from one end of Nassau County to the other during the day is caught in traffic.
Yes.
So how does that get addressed, or is that just something that we're stuck with?
No, I think there's a number of ways you can alleviate traffic, and first of all, investing in public transit works, right? And so notoriously on Long Island, it's easy to go east and west. It's hard to go north and south. So these bold vision and bold plans for light rail and bus rapid transit, this works, and bringing nice bus into the 21st century, expanding Able Ride, especially for our seniors on the North Shore who don't have access to Able Ride and Access-a-Ride like they do in other parts of North Hempstead and the county. So there are ways to alleviate traffic, but I think folks living here appreciate the ability to go in their own vehicle, to come and go as they please. And most importantly, these are hardworking folks who are commuting into the city to make a living. They're already spending their tax dollars in the city. They don't deserve to have this plan be balanced on their backs.
Okay, I'm not talking about congestion pricing. I'm talking, is there another way to reduce traffic in Nassau County?
Right. No, we should be investing far more in public transit in the county, right? Again, looking at those potential, and this is where the $1 trillion federal infrastructure project comes in, looking at those potential light rail projects north and south, looking at bus rapid transit from hubs, to help folks who don't have an easy commute, who are stuck in kind of one lane traffic, looking to build smart communities, right? Looking to increase parking where we can. There's so much to be done, but I will tell you that congestion pricing is going to hurt a lot of my constituents, and I am vehemently opposed.
Let me ask you this, because there's a number of issues here where you seem to be supporting in terms of congestion pricing and migrants, seem to be in accord with Republicans in the area. What do you consider in Nassau County? What are the issues that separate Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, I've spoken about this since I got elected to office. Nassau County Democrats believe in openness and transparency and fairness of our government, and the rule changes that we've proposed at the county legislature are in stark contrast to what Republicans have proposed. For example, when you sponsor a bill in Nassau County, it does not automatically get assigned to the floor of the legislature. It goes to the presiding officer's desk, and should he or her decide that they like the bill, they can bring it to a vote. It's undemocratic. So we've spoken about giving more agency to Republicans and Democrats to represent their constituents and bring bills forward. There's a support for term limits among Democrats to have turnover, of healthy turnover of legislators to allow new folks in. Democrats support ending political gerrymandering with nonpartisan redistricting. There's so many items that Democrats support in the county legislature and that has broad support in the community that Republicans don't disagree. And so to me, it comes down to how we run the government. And I think Nassau County punches far below its weight in terms of being a fair government for all its representatives.
Okay. So final question for you. Why should voters vote for you in your race against Samantha Gibbs?
Yeah, so I spend my time telling voters why they should vote for me. I don't spend my time slinging mud against an opponent. My opponent takes a very different track. My record is deserving of another term, passed a record number of bills in the county, delivered on issues that folks care about, whether it's affordability, whether it's veterans, whether it's taking care of people with disabilities, whether it's public safety. I've gotten things done. We've been able to completely modernize constituent service, where we've helped more constituents close more cases than anyone in that building. We've been able to make a difference in terms of underserved communities and impacted communities that need help by bridging the community and working with our philanthropic nonprofit partners. We've gotten more done, and I say this with confidence and with respect for my colleagues, but we've gotten more done in my legislative office, and I challenge any other legislator to put their record up to me to show that they've delivered more for their constituents, and it's why I'm running on my record, and I'm proud to run on it.
One final question I wanted to ask you, because is it because I'm in your district, or is it you that I'm getting so many mailers from the state Republican committee?
Yeah, no, it's because you're in the district, and this is unfortunately how they campaign. And this is not new. They tried this against me in 2021. The concept is deluge and bombard the voters with outrageously negative mailers and digital ads to try to drive up my negatives, as opposed to spending money on their own candidate. The mailers that you've gotten are outrageous, and they keep getting worse. And you'll notice that we don't stoop to their level. Unfortunately, this is how they spend their money. We're not going to get in the gutter with them.
But is this something that is directed toward you, or is this something that you see across Nassau County?
No, we see in target races across the county. This is how, unfortunately, Republicans campaign at the local level. It is tar and feather. It is attack and deluge and lie, because unfortunately, negative campaigning is effective, right? It's a lot more effective to run a negative ad on Facebook than a positive. The algorithm runs with the negative far faster than it runs with the positive. And it's on elected officials to say enough is enough, to do what quite frankly you're editorializing and saying, is that run on your own record, run on your own merits, and challenging the voters to say this is BS and garbage, and we're going to throw it in the garbage where it belongs.
All right. I want to thank you again for taking the time. I'll thank our Northwell Health for once again sponsoring us. A recording of today's discussion can be found on the island360.com website, our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and a story about today's interview will appear in the 6 Blank Slate Media newspapers probably next week. And I thank you again for taking the time. I've been also seeing a trend where people, some candidates don't want to sit down,
right, and
they prefer to let TV commercials and mailers do the talking. So it's appreciated to have you here. So my thanks again to Nassau County legislator Josh Lafazan for sitting down with us